Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this event, right? Sponsored by SOAS and the Sheikh Zayed Book Award. The Sheikh Zayed Book Award is one of the world's leading prizes dedicated to Arabic literature and culture. Since 2006, the award has brought recognition, reward, and readership to outstanding work by authors, translators, publishers, and organizations around the world. Right? In 2018, the award also launched a translation grant to help produce more quality Arabic books in translation outside the Arab world. The winning and shortlisted titles for the literature and children's literature categories are eligible for translation funding. Publishers from all over the world can apply to receive funding for the translation of one of these titles into any language. 16 books have been translated into multiple languages since the launch of the grant, including English, German, French, Italian, Greek, Georgian, and Ukrainian. In 2021, the award saw a growing interest in translation requests from Arabic into global languages, reiterating the importance of translation as an essential tool to build bridges between different nations and to represent cultures, literature, and heritage in different languages. SOAS is, of course, famous for its global reach and its commitment to the global South. SOAS is a world-leading center for the study of the Arab world with a high profile in cultural, literary, and translation studies. The series of 4 events in April, May, and June coincide with the award announcements in May. In these events, we'll bring together creative writers, translators, and researchers to talk about the role and place of Arabic culture and literature in today's ever-increasing global connectedness. These events are advertised already, but you can look them up on the SOAS website, keyword Sheikh Zayed Book Award. In today's event, which is the 3rd of the series, we focus on children's literature as word literature. We all read children's literature as children, young adults, or grown-ups. We also read it to children. It is an integral part of our life, of how we relate to children and of the ways in which we instill in our children values we believe in, pass on to them memories we cherish, share with them the stories we love, and bring them up in our languages and word views through fun and game. However, I note 2 absences. 1, the absence of Arabic children's literatures in word children's literature, and 2, the absence of children's literature in word literature or in considerations of word literature. We look at these 2 absences closely today. Where is Arabic children's literature? Who are the authors and what do they write about? What can explain the absence of Arabic children's literature in the world market and critical space? We have with us 3 distinguished panelists. Let me introduce them very briefly and let them speak for themselves. Raja Mallah is an architect from Morocco. She holds a master's degree in urban planning from the Nantes Paris University, France. In addition to her work as an architect in Dubai, she is interested in writing for children and young people. Her book, Maw'idi Ma'an Noor, My Date with the Light, has been shortlisted for the Sheikh Zayed Book Award in 2022 in the children's literatures category, this year. Right? Her most important publications are My Gift for Your Birthday, 2018, The Wings of My Plane, 2019, Emerald Garden, 2020, Let Me Explain the Meaning of Immortality, 2021. She has also literary translated works, most notably Ontology of Contemporary Emirati Poetry, 2007, Where Were They Writing translation from French into Arabic. This is this year, is it? And so that's Raja Mallah. And then we have with us also Pam Dix. Pam worked in London in the school library sector and as a university lecturer in children's literature. She has been the chair of IBBY UK since 2014 and is involved in many international projects to support this work. She's also the chair of the Akili Trust, a small charity that has been working in Kenya since 2008 and is a trustee for Book Aid International. She was the advisor editor of children's literature in a multi-literate world, published by UCL Institute of Education Press 2018. And we also have with us Charlotte Eyre. Charlotte Eyre is a freelance journalist and former children's editor at the Bookseller, where she is still a previewer. At the Bookseller, she wrote news and feature stories about the children's publishing industry, programmed the annual children's conference, and launched the YA Book Prize in 2014. She is a regular guest on radio programs such as Open Book on BBC Radio 4. All right. Before I go ahead and explain today's format, let me do some housekeeping. If you would like to hear this event in Arabic, please go to the bottom of your screen, click on an icon that looks like Earth, a globe, under which is written interpretation, and you can access this event in Arabic interpretation. سأعيد هذه الإرشادات بالعربية. لمن يحب الاستماع إلى الفعالية اليوم باللغة العربية فأرجو اللجوء إلى أسفل الشاشة على يدك اليمين. ستجدون أيقونة بشكل كرة أرضية. فقط عليك الضغط على الأيقونة فتجدون تعليمات إلى الاستماع إلى الفعالية بالترجمة العربية. So that's number one. Number two, please use the question and answer function to pose your questions to us and to the audience. And three, this event will be recorded, and when it is ready, when the recording is ready, it will be posted on the SOAS YouTube channel and also the Sheikh Zayed Book Award YouTube channel. All right, now we will begin right now. So today's format, first, we have an hour, but can go beyond a little bit if there is interest. Into today's event, we will follow this format, featured author, So we will talk to our author first, and then followed by panel discussion in the form of question and answers. And I'll pose the questions and ask the panelists to join me, We will start with Raja. Raja, When did you start writing for children?
First of all, I would like to thank you, Professor Wen, for your introduction, and thank you for your invitation. I would like also to express my thanks to all the audience. I'm very happy to be with you in this event to talk about the children literature in the world, and especially in Arabic world. I will talk about it through my humble experience in this field. As you know, and as you can see, I did not follow the academic path to be writer for kids. Many of my friends and relatives are quite surprised to see me jumping from designing houses and cities to writing for kids. I can understand the confusion, but I would like to say that many writers came from other fields and had parallel jobs. So why I landed in children's books field and how? Well, the story is simple and unexpected, even for me. I started writing for my kids 20 years ago when I became mom for the first time. Being mother changed completely my conception of life and showered me with many feelings, not only happiness and joy, but also fear. I realized suddenly that I'm here for a quite big and serious mission. And I understood and that I'm responsible for other little human beings. I'm responsible for their future, their souvenirs they will carry on for the rest of their lives. I decided to enjoy the trip with them and for them. So I realized how fast time is passing. So I decided to do my best to catch this moment by writing. I used it to keep a notebook and a pencil in my handbag with diapers and bottle feed. And when I was feeling gratitude to the moment, I settled to write some lines about these moments. I could be in a walk in the park, or it could be a simple evening at home. I wrote many texts in this, for their first step, for their first teeth, for their first day at school. So I had multiple notebooks. I lost many also. And I have realized that only books stay and could remain with me. In the 10th birthday of my eldest kid, Kenan, I decided to gather all these notebooks and notes and this writing he inspired in a book. So came my first book for him, which I called My Birthday for You, My Gift for Your Birthday. I decided to publish it years after to make it public. So the first book was for my eldest kid. My writing followed my kids' growth and evolution. And because we are living abroad, far from my home country, Morocco, I felt I have to introduce my family, my childhood and memories to them. They have many questions about my father, their grandpa, they never met. So I wrote for them The Wings of My Kite. This is a story telling my story, where I was writing letters to my dad, who passed away in very young age. Also, Emerald Garden was a day from my childhood with my grandma, which I wrote specially to my kids so they can know how great my grandma was and how great it is to have a grandma in his life. My story was somehow a time travel for them and for me. So they could meet my childhood through this book. This is my story with how I landed in writing. Sorry. You're muted.
I muted myself. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
So this is very intriguing because what you're telling me is that your writing was also a companion for your children as they were growing up. So let me come to you and ask you two more things, right? One is language, right? You're bilingual, and I assume your children are also bilingual. So in which language do you write for them, right? And when do you write in French or in Arabic? And if you write in two languages, when do you choose to write in which language? So this is question number one.
Okay.
And question number two, the sort of topics, right? Themes, and I hear a lot about memories, your own memories of your own childhood with your own parents in Morocco. And it seems to me that what you're trying to sort of like give your children is something that they don't have access to, right? Morocco, growing up in Morocco, memories of that, but your memories rather than the memories. So can you talk about these two, right? Very sort of like, and tell us, more about your work.
First of all, I will talk about the language, why I choose, which language I choose in the beginning and which language I'm using now. When I started writing for my kids, I was automatically writing in French. I don't know why. Maybe because at that time I was living in Paris, or maybe because I like this language especially, with all the nuances and poetry in this language, French language. But after living in Dubai for years. And at my big surprise, I started writing in Arabic. Why? I really don't know. I cannot say exactly why I chose to switch to Arabic, but I was really happy to reconnect with my mother tongue language. Each time I write in Arabic, I enjoy this rich dimension which was hidden inside me. So I can write Arabic, French, and sometimes English.
English
for
as
my
well.
children. Yeah. Sometimes I wrote some passage in in my gift to your birthday. It was also in passages in it was in 3 languages.
So it's multilingual. Your text is multilingual.
Yeah. The first one.
Okay. Tell us about sort of like, how do we play with multilingualism and memory? Tell us about memory and multilingualism a little bit more.
As I said, French was my first, not my first language, but I was writing in French, and I liked this dimensions, French dimensions, these nuances in words. But when I wrote in Arabic, it's like, I don't know, I was reconnecting with my grandma, maybe. I was like with my family. My grandma was talking Arabic, but my mom is talking French and Arabic. So it's like going to my past, my ancestor, I think, this language. And I feel Arabic, and I feel it now. I feel the word more now than before.
So
that I started.
The follow-up question. Yeah, so interesting. I mean, multilingualism, and this is our life, right? This is our environment. This is who we are, and we're multilingual.
Sometimes confusing.
And each language, but each language has its function. But I want to come to a follow-up question. Did writing for your children get you to pick up an interest in children's literature in general, and Arabic children's literature in particular? I mean, did you pick that up? Right. And I can sort of frame this when I was growing up in Libya. Right. So I heard children's songs. Right. And you see Sanduq al-Dunya, right. Like Judy and Punch stuff on TV. But all the children's books were translated. Right. And I didn't know about Arabic children's literature until I was a grown up, and my friend Samah Idris, Allah yarhamu, wrote for his children. So his journey in writing for children is like yours. He wanted to preserve. He wanted his books to be companions for his children as they grew up, and his book sort of grew up with them. And the other thing he wanted to do was to use these books to get them to be interested in the Arabic language. And the second one is remembrance of the Lebanese Civil War, right? So, and these are the very few instances of my knowledge of Arabic children's literature. So did you pick up an interest in Arabic children's literature?
I will confess that in the beginning, I didn't know that there is a literature dedicated to children. I thought the books for children is what we wrote at school only. So when 20 years before, when I was interested by this field, I started to get to be curious, to see the new publication in Arabic and other language, and to see the translation, just to know how big is this field, how writers are dealing with these subjects. And I was quite impressed that this field is progressing pretty fast. So from that, you can see that my interests grow progressively with my writing. And
so
you notice,
we're going to hold on to this question because I want to come to Pam and Charlotte in a bit to ask about the presence of Arabic children's literature in the word market outside of the Arabic speaking world. But before we get there, Raja, I believe you have an excerpt that you want to share with us would you read from your shortlisted book?
Yeah. I choose short passages, so I will not be very long, and I will let time for others. And I pick page 24. As you say, I will just brief you. This is Maw'idi Ma Noor. It's my date with light. It's telling a story about a girl in a very small town in Morocco. This girl has a disease. She's losing her eyesight progressively, and she's living a very hard life with her parents and her family there in Morocco. And instead of losing hope, instead of just let it be and losing her eyes, she decided to be a doctor, which is not believable when we are going to be blind. So this is a very long journey, full of surprises and adventures. And in the end, it shows us that dreams and hope are strongest than everything in life. So my passage is like that. It will be here. She's talking about her childhood. كنت أصغرهم مصابة بهذا الداء الذي جعلني أعيش بين عالمين، عالم المبصرين وعالم العميان. في أدنى سلم العالم الأول وفي أعلى سلم العالم الثاني، الأكثر تعاسة في عالم المبصرين والأكثر حظاً في عالم العميان. تأرجحي بين العالمين جعل مشاعري تتضارب. هكذا أجد نفسي أتنقل بين السعادة الغامرة والتعاسة الصامتة في اليوم نفسه، دون أن أعرف متى سيلفظني هذا العالم إلى عالم آخر، ومتى سيلفظني العالمان لأضيع بينهما. لم أنعم بصديقة أو رفيقة، كنت تائهة بين نفسي وبيني، بيني وبين نفسي. من أنا؟ ولم اختارني هذا المرض أنا بالذات.
Thank you, Raja.
The other, if you don't mind, it's very small. تكاد الأزقة تخلو إلا من أطفال يلعبون الأدوار الخالدة للشرطي والحرامي، ويتفانون في أدائها بجدية بالغة، وهم يرتجلون قصصاً وحكايات يصدقونها قبل غيرهم، غير مدركين أن مصائر أخرى تحاك لهم في كواليس القدر. من منهم سيكون في خندق الخير، ومن منهم سيقذف به في خندق الشر، ومن منهم سينتصر للحياة. The last one is very short also. ها أنا, when she decided to return back to her home country as a doctor. ها أنا أعود طوعاً لقريتي على القطار نفسه الذي لطالما أرعبتني صفارته، لموطن طفولتي، لجبالي وحارتي، لمداخن ما زالت تنفت الآمال والأحلام، ذكرى وحنين وحب لي هناك.
Thank you so much, Raja. Now let me turn to sort of Pam and Charlotte. Pam first, and set the scene up for us in the UK and in English. I mean, you've heard from Raja the sort of what it is like, right, in Arabic a little bit. So what about here? I mean, it's different, I assume. Yeah, Pam, shall we start with you?
Yes, thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me to be here. I think it's a very different scene, and one that we've been trying within my world of IBBY in the UK to address as much as we can. So I think the majority of books that are available in the UK in Arabic would be translations from English to Arabic. So they would be books that are part of series that are translated into many languages to try and cater for the needs of different language speakers in the UK. We've been aware of this situation for some time, and we have done a few projects which you'll pick up when you see the slides that I've done. But one of the most interesting ones was to work with our colleagues in France, where they had done a very good list of 100 children's books in Arabic. And we thought that would, if people in the UK could know about that, it would help them select books for the Arabic speakers in their communities. So we worked collaboratively with France and Ireland to get that list translated so that the librarians and bookshops could see what books were available that they could possibly buy, because the difficulty is if you don't speak a language is selecting books in that language. Although I think I have this idea for running a course on how to select a language that you don't speak, because I think there are some good activities that we could do there. And again, talking to my French colleagues, they've just done that for school librarians, and it was a very successful training. So we've been trying to promote the various awards. And I'm very aware that the work of Sheikh, who is from Kalimat Foundation, has also helped to bring attention to the Arabic world and books that are produced in the Arabic world. And I think as she's president of the International Publishers Association this year, we'll probably hear a lot more from her about it. So that's a very brief overview, but I think like many languages spoken in the UK, the children's book provision is not always there to support the children's reading in that language, unless the parents have access to buying books from outside the UK market.
So Charlotte, what about the sort of the English sort of a book market? I know sort of like, when we met earlier, we talked about how dominant, children's literature in English is in the world. Could you tell us a little bit about the diversity of this body of literature, right? What is being published, which age groups, does the material cover, purposes of children's literature? And please, Pam, come back, right, if you want to address these questions as well, right? Purposes of children's literature, how big is the market really? Just tell us more about it. Charlotte?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. The market for children's books in the UK is a very mature one. We've been in this country's been producing children's literature, for centuries now, in a very successful fashion. The size of the market is massive. So people often say that children's books make up about a quarter to a third of all the books produced in the country. I asked my colleague to crunch the latest figures through Nielsen Bookscan, which looks at the market as a whole, and he said that last year children's book sales hit £372 million through Bookscan, but that's missing 10 weeks of lockdown. So if we had the full year statistics, they probably would have been a record year. As it stands, the previous record year was 2019, where sales were 387.6 million. So far in 2022, the children's market is running 3% ahead of that record year. So he is pretty confident that the children's book market will crack the £400 million mark for the first time ever by the end of 2022. So that is a very, very, very big market. And publishers in this country produce books for all age groups. And when they say children's publishing, they mean everything from baby books, so for stiff cardboard books for the tiny children, babies, all the way up to teen and YA, and those can be crossover books. So things like The Hunger Games, which are also read by adults, are quite often usually classed as the YA and made by children's publishers. It's a huge industry. So when people say, there's lots of reasons why people make children's books, but people make children's books primarily because it's an industry. It's a big reason they want to make money, but also because they just love literature. They're passionate about getting children reading. They're passionate about stories. They love opening children's minds to different worlds, different stories, different people, new opportunities. And so in terms, even though it is a business, I think people love what they do and they're very passionate about children's literature as a genre.
Can I turn to you then, Pam? Because I know you're sort of like you're involved in a charity that is trying to make sure children have access to children's literature. So can I then pick your brains, right, about why is this important, right? We have a huge group, right, and they're very diverse, from very young children to less young children, young adults, and almost adults, something like this, right? And it's a huge market, yes, but also children love to read. and we love to read to them, right? Because you could, and why is this then important, right? For
Thank
us
you.
as adults, and you think for the children, I know you teach children's literature as well.
Before I do, I'd just like to add that within the amazing figures, Charlotte, I haven't heard those recently, so that's incredible. The children's information book market is also very big. So we're not only talking about stories, but we're talking about information books for children. And that's been a hugely popular genre recently. And it's very interesting that a lot of contemporary information books for children are written in a narrative style. So they're picking up on that kind of idea of longer text and engagement with story rather than just sharing of facts. Anyway, to go back to your question, the organisation that I represent, IBBY, which is the International Board of Books for Young People, was set up after World War II by an inspirational woman called Jelle Lepman. And its aim was to encourage that notion of international understanding through children's books. And that need has never gone away in the years since World War II and has become even greater now, I think. So what the IBBY world does is join up the whole children's book producing world, which could be the consumers, the parents and children, but also teachers, academics, writers, illustrators, and so forth, into a kind of global network where we can share ideas and thinking. And the core of it is I mean, I think it's simplified in a theoretical approach that was laid out by Rudine Sims Bishop, the American academic, which is called the windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors theory. And it's basically a summary of the idea that if you see yourself in a children's book, you recognize something. If you look through the mirror, you can see the world of another. And with a sliding glass door, you can open and go into another world. And there have been, and there still are, huge numbers of children who don't get to the starting block because they never see themselves reflected in a children's book, because there are no books that are about them. And whilst that doesn't stop them from reading, I think the engagement with reading changes when you've seen yourself in a book, or you've seen something about your life or your concerns or your world in a book, which is what Raja was talking about with her writing, I think, really. And that also goes to language. If you've never seen your language written in a book, then you don't think your language can be a book language. And I love Raja's example of using 3 languages in a text, because that's what I hope we'll see a lot more of, because many of our children are growing up in a very multiliterate environment, with grandparents speaking one language, parents speaking another language, themselves being in a community that speaks another language. So seeing that development of not necessarily whole text, but just words being incorporated is a great starting point, I think. So it's diversity on that bigger scale that I want to see, and what we work towards. And then the other point of it is the fact that despite in the UK being a very rich world, or throughout the world, there are many children who live in situations where they don't have access to books. They don't have access to libraries. They don't have access to school libraries. They don't have the money for books. So another arm of the world is to run projects in communities that are very challenged. And they may be communities in refugee camps. They may be communities in Afghanistan where children are being denied access to school. They may be in troubled areas, or they may be situations where, because of natural disasters, books have been lost. So there's a whole outreach program of getting books to children who are deprived of books. And finally, to answer your question of why, I think at the very heart of it, everyone who's involved in children's books has this core belief that if they can find the right book for the right child, they can make a reader. And certainly for me as a librarian, as a teacher, that's always been the challenge. And the kind of buzz that you get when someone says to you, this is my country, this is me, this is something I can use in my classroom, you feel you've changed the life of someone. So, I mean, that's quite ambitious, but I do feel that that's what drives us.
Very nice.
Raja or Charlotte, would you like to come in, or shall I push further?
No, please go ahead. I find it's very interesting what I heard now. Yeah.
I think sort of like, I think all of us here today will probably share the kind of aspirations that Pam has just sort of articulated on our behalf. And one of the things is really also part of this dream of diversity, right? That diversity, we live in a diverse community, and to have that diversity reflected in our writing is very important. And I come back, right, to this point about the absence of Arabic children's literature, right? In two senses. There's one sense is Arabic children's literature is still maturing, is not as old as, right, English children's literature. But the other problem is really, right, sort of the market and the market for the translation of children's literature. So can we talk a little bit about this? And is there an explanation for that? Why? I mean, is it because, like, I was thinking about it the other day, Harry Potter has been translated in almost every word language and it's made into films. Is it because of this dominance, right, of the English children's literature market that is further buttressed by Hollywood, for example? Shall we go around the room and say, shall we start with you, Charlotte?
I think the Hollywood media culture is an interesting thing to talk about. And I think especially with teen and YA, we perhaps see that there is a funnel, especially American, actually, not so much British, but especially American literature. There seems to be a bit more of a funnel to Hollywood and to those producers, and that happens. And I think what's quite interesting to notice or to note as well is, so for example, this autumn, there's a fantastic teenage book coming out called Where the Lemon Trees Grow, about the Syrian war. And it's absolutely wonderful. And the author who wrote it is Syrian, but she grew up partly in Dubai and also a little bit in Canada. She lives in Switzerland, and she wrote this book in English. And it's very, very difficult for anybody to get a book deal. I completely understand that. But I think what is perhaps even harder is to get people who are writing about their backgrounds or their countries in their own language, and perhaps because of this dominance of English. You know, that's I think, you know, I'm sure Pam knows a lot about this, but it would be interesting to look more in to say, well, where are the voices writing in their own language, and what can publishers do, or even Netflix producers and Hollywood producers, to bring those voices to the fore? And that's the challenge, isn't it?
Pam?
Yes, I totally agree. It's a real challenge. And I think there are whole parts of the world where writers, we're not hearing their voices at all. So we're dependent on a kind of network of communications between publishers. But to just backtrack one step, I mean, we know that 10 years ago, only 1% of the children's books published in the UK were in translation. And when you think of you know, Tintin and Heidi and all the old classics, that means very few of those books were new books. So it's very good now to have some specific publishers who are publishing books that are in translation. And I would single out Pushkin and Enchanted Lion as two publishers who've done some really sort of fantastic work in finding and bringing books to our attention. But I think we are really dependent on the networks within countries to find those voices and to try and put them forward. And the best stage is Bologna and the Children's Book Fair at Bologna, because that's where books are bought and sold. And I mean, it maybe, I mean, I'm sure there have been Arabic focuses at Bologna, but maybe, for example, it could be the subject of another Bologna book fair with a big focus on promoting some key Arabic books, for example. I mean, I had a look this year, and there wasn't a great deal about Arabic children's literature in Bologna in this first fair that we've had since the pandemic. Quite a lot of empty stands with very little going on there. So there were some good stands, don't get me wrong, Kalimat being an exemplar, but I think there's more work that could be done promoting local authors on the international stage.
Can we turn to you, Raja, then, as author for children's books?
Yeah, I agree totally with what this ladies said. And I can say that since its origin, cinemas has taken its source from literature. and some adaptation has become masterpieces, other has been forgotten. The same goes for children literature, and we know the success of books and movies such as Little Nicolas Le Petit, and the saga of Harry Potter. So the attraction of cinema to and literature certainly works on dreams and on emotions and feelings. The adaptation of a literature work to the big screen will encourage, I think, the reader to dip in the reading and to discover by word the images discovered on the big screen. And I think this is a good way to promote a book. And I think, and to encourage the young people to read. And I hope Arabic Word will do the same, because he has the potential to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The sort of, what is absent in the Arab world is really a cinema, like Hollywood cinema.
Exactly.
Right? So we have very small art house cinemas, television, again, sort of national, and it's kind of really, I'm not able to imagine that there is an Arab Hollywood that would sort of adapt Arabic children's literature into blockbusters, for example, right? So most likely we'll have art house productions. But let's move that aside and overlap it. Pam, please come in.
Yes, I just wanted to add one thing, which I would say that more important in the UK market has been children's television. And sadly, we see many fewer adaptations of children's books than there were in the heyday. But that was a very important vehicle when Channel 4 and the BBC children's programmes were mainstream rather than, it's a whole other discussion about what's happening with children's television, which I won't go down. But, I for many years was a BAFTA judge on children's adaptation films. And we just don't see that quality of production anymore. So just wanted to make that point.
Yeah. So there's something happening in sort of in the industry, and there's something happening in the market. But sort of like, can we overlap these issues with another issues, which is the size of the critical space, right, for introducing, assessing, evaluating, promoting children's literature, and in particular children's literature in translation. Can I come to you, Charlotte, to address this issue? And then Pam, of course.
So what I've noticed, and that everyone else has noticed, is a real lack of space in newspapers and magazines to talk about children's books. So what we tend to have now is that a situation where children's book critics or children's book reviewers are only given a page or perhaps even 2 pages. And when you think about how many children's books are published, I was sent 400 to look at for the month of August. That are coming out next August. Now that's a quiet month in publishing, 400 books just from UK publishers. So what reviewers and critics have to do is pick their favourites, and then so you get the top picks, the top picks from the Observer or the top picks from the Sun, but that doesn't mean that they are being looked at critically. And the one thing that newspapers always did is that they put reviews in front of people who weren't necessarily looking for children's book reviews. Now there are lots of fantastic websites or social media pages, and people will say, oh well, we can take this online instead. But what happens there is that they tend to be read by the people who are looking for information about children's books. Perhaps they love David Walliams, so they will go and Google David Walliams and find a children's book blog about it. But what they're not seeing then is reviews about other children's books, and also the readers of newspapers who are reading their paper and thinking, well, that's an interesting article about the war in Ukraine. I like this article about growing flowers in my garden. Oh, look, and actually, I might enjoy a bit of critical writing about children's books. And that's just not happening at the moment, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah, I agree. And sort of, I feel that, part of this critical space is also to be able to bring out, the language, right, in children's writing, in writing for children, not children's writing for children, writing in children's book, the aesthetics, the fun, right, but also the imagination that goes into children's literature, right? So can you talk about this a little bit, sort of Pam and Raja and Charlotte as well, if you like, right? And the role, the importance of the role in children's literature in children's life, in children's upbringing. Yeah, sort of, shall I come to you, Pam, first, and then Charlotte, and then Raja?
I would just, following on a little bit from what Charlotte said, I do think that one of the times when you get more coverage in the press is when there are awards, and if the agencies managing awards can get good press coverage. So, you know, we're about to have the Carnegie Greenaway Awards in the UK. That will always get press coverage. If there's anything controversial, it will get even more press coverage. So that you then get into some kind of sometimes quite unpleasant diatribes about what is children's literature, where is it going? Is this subject matter suitable for children? Should this book have been nominated for an award? So that's the only time that you get real critical space. But to go back to your other question about language and children, I mean, I think that the richness that you can get from reading a wide variety of books is really very important to a child's development. And if the only books that are being reviewed are not really reflecting the depth and complexity of the market, then children are often reading at a more superficial level than they could do. And they're dependent on librarians and teachers to help them find books that are of greater complexity or more challenging to them. Because we know that children read up and down, they read around, they read widely. If they've got an interest in a subject, they're going to read a really complicated text on it, but equally they like to go back to the picture books that they loved when they were little. And so you need to be able to give them access to that diversity to help their language development.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that
Raja?
answer what you asked?
Yes, Raja, what about your experience of you know, your books being reviewed or looked at or promoted? Yeah, do you have any sort of like about this about the presence of your books, you know, in this critical space, and sort of like your response to that, your feelings about that? You're muted.
Sorry, I was, as I said, I was expected to be in the light by my writings. I just wanted to into this trip just to talk to my kids, and when I found that my books are here, and we're now here to talk about my experience, it's really strange to me. It's confusing for me because it wasn't meant to be like that. It was just a whisper from me to my kids, and this whisper took these dimensions. And but me personally, I tried writing for kids and found myself able to write for teenagers, especially. I am one of these people who think that we can discuss many topics with children. And I have a lot of, I choose to talk sometimes about complicated topics like illness, like griefs, like abuses. So, and somehow I took this responsibility, which is not very easy. I have to choose the words, and I have to choose the right words to approach these very big subjects. And when we write for kids, we have to know which range we're focusing to, because writing for kids is a big and quite huge responsibility, and we have very extremely wide field, and from 5 years or from even before to 12, 15 years. And we can talk about this after in how we can approach, if you want, this range of ages. I don't know if I
it's
answered
sort of like
to your
age
questions.
difference makes, I agree. And it's an important question. And I think we're trying to grapple this question, but we're not quite getting there yet. But time is flying, right? It's almost 3 o'clock already. So what we could do is really pause for Pam. Pam, you want to do your PPT, right?
Yes,
and then we can take questions. Yeah.
Yes.
Shall I share it?
Yes, and just flag up one other thing, which is just illustration, which is another language for children, which is very important. I think you can just pass the slides over the screen, because I'll just say what each one refers to, because people can look them up. So if you go to the next slide.
Okay.
Here I've put the 3 IBBY resource lists, which are done every 2 years. The first one is wordless books, which came out of a project working with refugees in Lampedusa, and it's a list of wordless books that are published around the world. It's now in its 5th iteration, and it's the most wonderful resource collection, which you can see if you go to Rome. Otherwise, you can see online at the IBBY website, the main IBBY website. The second is the honour list, which is done nominations by the 80 member countries of IBBY, and their books in translation, picture books and illustrated books. And the third one is the books for and about children with disability. And again, that's a collection of books nominated from around the world. This year, when we did the selection for the IBBY list, 90 books were submitted from UK publishers, which is the biggest number we've ever had. The next is to draw people's attention, if they've never been there, to the International Children's Library in Munich, which was also set up after World War II and is a wonderful place to visit if anyone's in Munich. But they produce an annual catalogue called the White Ravens, which is their list of the best books they've seen from around the world. And then the last is just the link to the 100 books in Arabic that I mentioned, which we did with IBBY France, which is online at the IBBY website.
This one, right?
It's the bottom.
So I have this first, second.
Yes, I think this isn't. Yeah, there was a later version of this presentation with another slide. Don't worry. And then that one is just to remember the Hans Christian Andersen Award winners, which is nominated every 2 years, and they are after a very careful selection process by academics and panelists, are considered to be the best writer and illustrator from around the world. And that is a challenge, I think, to publishers to make them available in many languages. So I've just given you the 2022 winners there.
Great,
okay.
thank
you.
Stop share, okay. There's something wrong with my computer. It doesn't work properly. All right, sorry about that. Anything else before we sort of open up to questions from the audience? Anybody?
Okay.
I just wanted to say really quickly that one thing that is so wonderful about children's books is that they remind us how much we have in common, as well as being able to reach diverse people of all kinds. And I thought it was Raja was talking about writing about her grandmother, but also the bad experiences in life, like illness and grief. And children all over the world have those experiences. So a child in Australia or Zambia or Switzerland or Peru, wherever, can read that book and have and the experiences that Raja's characters are going through will resonate with them. And I think that's a truly wonderful thing.
Pam?
I think I'll take away from this session the notion that Raja gave of whispering to your children. Maybe we can get more whisperers around the world who can start writing books for their children. I think it's a lovely concept.
Thank you.
Raja?
Thank you. Well, what to say? I was very delighted, happy to be with you and to talk about myself. It's not a habit for me. I never talk about myself. I like to others talk, my children or my other kids talk about me one day when they will read a book and when they will close the book and something reaches them from my life. If one word or one sentence touch their soul, I would be very grateful.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I have questions from the audience. And the first one is to Raja. Did you translate your books by yourself?
The first one, Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
You
my
sort of
problem that I have
then-
low battery. I don't know how.
Okay.
These
If that's
iPhones.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
the case.
yeah,
Just don't leave,
I
Alex. Let me
trust.
finish let me finish the question. Can you
Yeah,
please
yeah.
talk to us about your experience in translating your own books? Any difficulties?
Yeah, because when I translate my books, I'm reread it. I'm writing again. So it's like I'm writing twice. I'm not translating. I'm rewriting in other language. This is the problem I face. So if I write in Arabic and I want to translate in French, suppose I'm writing in Arabic and another in French. It's not similar words, it's not the similar path, but it's the same feeling. So I prefer that someone else objectively will translate it. It's better than me, because I will involve myself in the translations. If you got me. I don't know if I'm clear in this.
I do the same. Yeah.
I'm rewriting in another language.
Yeah.
This is what
I hate translating myself. Yeah, I was asked to do it. I was like,
exactly. I don't know if they can catch the sense of what I'm saying. Yeah.
So there's another question for you, right? What do you feel Arab writers need to work on more so that their books become more appealing to kid readers? Ideas, style, diversity in topics, others. What do you think? And I think this is a question for all of us, right?
Exactly.
For all of you. Yeah. So we'll start with Raja and we come to Pam and then come to Charlotte. Raja.
I used to say that when we write for kids, we have to write for the kids inside us. We have to find the kids inside us and to be just as we are, to say what we're feeling, then to say the truth with the simple words. This is what I can advise humbly to others. The writer, his job is to write, but the reader has a job to read. So if writers just write, they should have an audience. Parents should help and encourage their kids to write. If I'm writing for someone and this someone is not coming to find my words, it's like what to say, it's hopeless. So writers and readers should meet somewhere, and this somewhere should be a truth story, a true story and a true feeling inside. That's I can say about what I advise writers to do. And also, I think that cinema was the film producer should have an interest to the kids' books. And one of my dreams is to do small short films or cartoons from my books. This would be a good thing to do for me and for kids. And so this is experience I wanted to Arabic world. I don't know if they will. There is someone to be interested in that, but this is my hope. At least for my little books.
I hope you'll be heard. Pam?
Inshallah.
I think the comment that I would like to make just from the Arabic books that I've looked at is the need for illustrators to be more confident about their own style. Because, I mean, this is a very sweeping generalization, and I know that I could be very challenged for it. But I see many books that are a halfway house between cultures and often derivative of European illustration style, maybe because they've been taught or been on courses with European illustrators. And I think they need confidence to develop their own style, which makes their own cultural reference, and to tell their own traditional stories as well as absorb European literature. So I'd like to see more of that happening. That's very broad overview, I know, but I mean, obviously I don't read Arabic, so I can't comment on the content of many stories, but I've been very disappointed at the number that are just end up being not one thing or the other, I think, in terms of illustration. And I think illustration is one of the most powerful ways of getting children to engage with story.
So before I turn to Charlotte, there is a request for you. Could you please share the link of the IBBY list of the words illustrators? Is it on the PPT?
Yes, the illustrators list, or the
illustrators list.
There isn't an IBBY illustrators list, but illustration is a category every 2 years in the honour books list. Is that? I hope that's what the person was referring to.
That's
on the IBBY.org, not IBBY.org.uk, but IBBY.org, which is the international site.
So Charlotte, shall we come to you?
I think I can't speak specifically for books written in Arabic for children, but I think in general, I agree with Raja that emotional truth and emotional honesty is very important, as is seeing the world through a child's perspective. Would they experience having to go to a food bank the same way that an adult would? Would they experience their parents losing a job in the same way that their parents would? What would be their feelings about that? You know, good experiences and bad, I think, is really important. And also, I think there's a balance between being authentic to yourself, which is incredibly important, but also being aware of what the market is and what is selling and what is being published, because ultimately you do have to get somebody to agree to publish your book, and they have to like what they see. And they buy books not just because they like them, they think they can sell them. They think this book has a place and a purpose in the market. They think it will reach that reader that they want to reach that they haven't reached already. So just reading widely of the books that you like and you admire. So if you like a certain children's author, really read it quite critically, look at the illustrations, look at the text, and work out what you love about it and why you think that works for a child audience.
Great. I think these are all the questions you have. So we can come to a conclusion on that very nice note, beautiful note. So thank you again, my panelists, Pam, Charlotte, and Raja, for taking part in this event. And I hope you enjoyed it. I definitely did. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And
thank you all for
It
coming.
was a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you.
Pleasure meeting you.
Bye.
Oh, thank you.
Bye, guys.